2 years. That's how long my world stayed still, my body immobile, my voice trapped behind the steel bars of a coma. People think silence is peace, but it's not. Silence is a scream no one hears. It's the weight of time sinking into your bones as memories echo louder than any machine. I woke up on a rainy afternoon, the window cracked open just enough to let in the scent of wet earth and betrayal. My mother wept. The nurse gasped, and the first word I whispered was her name. Almeda. The girl I swore to return to. The one whose laughter I held onto during the darkest nights of unconsciousness. The girl who whispered forever into my ear right before the crash. I fought for that word, for her. But when they finally let her in, her smile was dressed in guilt and her finger wore someone else's promise. Leo's. He was my best friend. He knew everything. He was there at the hospital. He was the one who held my hand and said, "You'll wake up to her." But he lied. And she let him. As I watched her lips tremble with 1,000 rehearsed apologies, something inside me went quiet again, not from illness, not from shock, but from grief. I didn't come back to fight for her. I came back to bury what was left of me and rebuild what they thought they had stolen. The rain wasn't heavy that night, just steady, like soft fingertips drumming on a table. Gentle, rhythmic, hypnotic. It painted tiny rivers down the windshield as the wipers cleared a path every few seconds, only for it to blur again. I remember the warmth of her hand resting on mine, fingers tracing invisible circles on my skin like she was trying to write something she couldn't say aloud. Almeda sat in the passenger seat, head tilted slightly toward the cracked window. Her hair was tied in a loose braid, the end resting on her shoulder like it, too, was listening to her sing. She always sang during night drives. An old song played on the radio, something from the 90s. The lyrics weren't romantic in any traditional sense, but the way she sang them made them feel like vows. She looked over at me halfway through the chorus, eyes glowing in the blur of dashboard light. "Even if you fall asleep for 100 years, she whispered, "I'll be right here when you wake up." I laughed softly, not knowing how much weight those words would carry, not knowing they would be the last words I'd remember her saying with love in her voice. I squeezed her hand. "Then I'll dream of you." She smiled, and it broke me even then, how much I loved her. The road twisted ahead, lined with tall pine trees that blurred in the wet night. We were supposed to reach her parents' cabin in an hour, a weekend away. No internet, just us. Just the sound of her laughter bouncing off the walls and the scent of pine and rain and burnt cocoa. She reached for the aux cord. "Don't you dare ruin this nostalgia," I teased. "You're such a grandpa," she replied, laughing, her teeth flashing like they always did when she was happiest. I glanced at her instead of the road. That was my first mistake. In that second, just a blink, headlights flared across the bend, a truck, too fast, too close, too sudden. I reacted on instinct. Tinked, jerked the wheel hard left, hand yanking hers without even thinking. Her scream never had time to form. The world spun into chaos, metal twisted like paper, glass exploded like fireworks. The music cut off mid-note, replaced by the guttural roar of impact and the violent, shattering silence that follows. And then, nothing. Darkness. Not sleep. Sleep has warmth. Sleep has peace. This was something else. It was a black ocean with no surface, no air, no time. I didn't feel my body. I didn't know I still had one. But I remembered. I remembered her voice, the warmth of her hand, the promise in her song, the half-wrapped velvet box hidden in my jacket pocket. The ring. I'd planned it for months, not an engagement ring, not yet, just a promise, a silver band engraved with "I'll still choose you," a whisper meant for her finger. I never got to give it to her. I watched memories play like cruel projections on an endless loop. Our first kiss at the train station when she slipped and laughed against my mouth. The time she cried in my arms after her brother left. The morning she brought me coffee with whipped cream shaped like a heart. The tiny fights, the sleepy goodnights, her humming in the shower. Every moment I ever loved her became a prison I couldn't escape. And underneath all of it, one constant question. Is she waiting for me? Days passed, then months, but in the dark, I couldn't tell. I just kept hoping her voice would reach me again, that she'd hold my hand and remind me I wasn't gone. But over time, the memories changed. Her face grew blurrier, her voice softer, and another voice grew louder. Leo's. My best friend. He spoke beside me, sometimes daily, sometimes not at all, but when he did, it was always careful, too careful. She's trying, but it's hard on her. 2 years is a long time. He wouldn't want you to suffer, Almeda. Almeda. He said her name with the kind of softness that used to belong to me. I wanted to scream, but I had no mouth. I wanted to move, but I was stone. I wanted to return, but I was buried in a silence deeper than sleep, and still, I believed she would wait, because she promised, and that's the thing about promises from people you love. Even if they never meant them, you do. I don't know when the light came. Maybe it was a sliver at first, a slant of gold behind my eyes, a warmth in my fingertips, a sound, a name, my name, then, her name, and when I opened my eyes, blinking into a sterile world of beeping monitors and pale walls, the first word I whispered was, Almeda. The nurse gasped, my mother cried, a doctor called for help, but my heart only waited for her. And I still didn't know. I didn't know that the girl I woke for had already moved on. That the arms I reached for were already promised to another. That the ring I never gave would be left unopened in a drawer. She wasn't alone after all, but I was. And somehow, that hurt more than the crash. They say a coma is quiet, peaceful even. They're wrong. Silence is not peace, silence is prison. You don't sleep in a coma, you drift, caught somewhere between memory and time, trapped inside your own skin like a coffin you never agreed to lie in. My body was still, but my mind, it was screaming. Every beep of the heart monitor was a reminder that I was still here. Every hiss of oxygen whispered, you haven't left yet. But I couldn't open my eyes, I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. I was a ghost, haunting my own body. And yet, I wasn't alone. I remember the voices. My mother was the first. She always smelled like lavender and grief. She read to me like I was still a boy, whispering prayers between chapters. She would hold my hand, brush my hair back, and cry softly when she thought I couldn't hear. But I heard everything, especially him. Leo. He came almost every day. I knew it was him by the way his shoes clicked against the tiles, confident, rhythmic, a sound I once trusted. He would sit on the stool beside me, sigh like the world was breaking him, and then start talking. Still hanging in there, huh? He'd mutter, voice tight. Stubborn as always. He brought updates, weather, sports, work gossip. But he always ended with her. She misses you, he'd say softly. She wears your ring every day. She hasn't taken it off, not once. And for a while, that kept me alive. The idea that she was waiting, that she hadn't moved on, that my silence hadn't erased me from her world. But then I noticed something. Every time Leo said her name, his voice cracked, just a little, not enough to notice, unless you had nothing but silence to study. And I had nothing but silence. He whispered once, thinking I was too far to hear. It's been a year, Almeda. Her name. He wasn't speaking to me. She was there. She needs to let go, he said. You can't ask her to wait forever. She didn't respond. I waited for her voice, the way it used to sound when she'd say my name like it was a promise. But all I got was her breath, a soft, broken sigh, and footsteps, leaving. The next day, Leo returned alone. He didn't speak for a long time, just sat beside me and placed something on my chest. A photograph. I couldn't see it, but I felt it, the edges, the weight, the betrayal hidden in silence. She needs to live her life, he whispered, and so do I. I wanted to scream, I wanted to lurch out of bed, tear off the wires, and look him in the eyes and ask him what he had done. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed, voiceless, powerless. My world shrank to the hum of machines and the weight of absence. Almeda's visit stopped after that. Her perfume no longer lingered in the room. No more soft footsteps, no more humming to my heartbeat, no more fingers gently brushing mine in the hope I'd respond. The chair she used to curl into remained empty, day after day, night after night. She left, and with her went the warmth. That was when the pain began. Not the physical kind. The doctors said my body had stabilized, that I was healing, somehow. But grief has no pulse. It seeps in quietly, staining your soul. One night, during the third winter of my silence, I heard Leo again. This time, his voice didn't shake. "She's not coming back, man." A pause. "I'm sorry." No, he wasn't. He exhaled deeply. I imagined him running a hand through his hair, standing up from the stool, like the weight of his betrayal had finally settled into his spine. "I didn't plan for it to happen," he muttered. "It just did. We were both grieving, we were both lost." He sounded more like he was trying to convince himself than me. Then came the final blow. "I proposed last week." I stopped breathing. Not literally, the machine still said I was alive. But inside, something folded in on itself. I stayed in that room for weeks after that. Or maybe months. I lost track. The seasons changed outside the window, and I didn't care. Snow, rain, sunshine, none of it reached me anymore. All I could think about was the promise she made. "I'll be right here when you wake up." And how easily it dissolved into nothing. It wasn't just that she moved on. It was who she moved on with. Leo, the one who held my hand, told me she still loved me and fed me lies like they were medicine. She didn't even say goodbye. She just let my name fade from her lips like it had never meant anything at all. One morning, I heard my mother crying again. She begged the doctors not to give up. "I still feel him," she said. "He's still fighting." And she was right. Because something inside me refused to die. Not love, not anymore. It was rage. Rage that they wrote my ending before I ever got to speak my last line. Rage that I gave them every piece of me, and they buried me while I was still breathing. And then, one day, I blinked. Ked, once, then twice. My fingers twitched. Alarms blared, nurses shouted. My mother dropped to her knees, sobbing into her hands. I was back. But not the same. Because silence didn't heal me. It carved me hollow. And I woke not with love in my chest, but with a plan. Because if they thought I'd stay the ghost they buried, they'd forgotten who I was before I fell asleep. Light. That's what came first. Not sunlight, not the warmth that spills in through curtains in the early morning. No, this was sterile, cold. A rectangle of white light in the corner of my vision, too bright and too far away. Then sound. The hum of machines, a distant voice, a woman weeping, no, sobbing. It was my mother. I knew that sound, it lived somewhere in my chest long before I could name it. I blinked once. The world shifted. I blinked again. And suddenly, the room was real. The walls were pale, the ceiling dotted with tiny cracks. A beeping heart monitor beside me kept time like a clock I'd been suspended inside for too long. And my mother, her face buried in my shoulder, her fingers tangled with mine, cried like she'd been holding her breath for years. "She's awake!" the nurse gasped, her hand flying to her chest. He's awake!" A doctor shouted instructions. Feet hurried across linoleum floors. I tried to speak, but my throat burned like it had been abandoned by time. And still, despite everything, despite the flood of stimulus and the tremble of my limbs, I forced one word out through the desert of my voice. "Almeida." They froze. My mother choked back another sob and nodded, like hearing that name confirmed something she was afraid to hope for. "I'll call her," she said softly, brushing my hair back like I was still her little boy, like I hadn't just returned from death. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to prepare. She didn't come that day, or the day after. The world outside the window kept moving, ignorant to the storm rising inside me. Leaves turned red and gold. A nurse changed the flowers. Visitors came and went from other rooms, but my room remained waiting, until the third day. I knew it was her before I opened my eyes. The scent of vanilla and something expensive filled the space, faint, curated, intentional. Her perfume always used to smell like home. Now it smelled like someone else's life. I turned my head. There she stood, Almeida. Her hair was longer than I remembered, curling slightly at the ends like she hadn't straightened it that morning. Her beige coat matched her heels. A nude-toned bag clung to her shoulder like an accessory chosen by someone else. And her hand was laced with another's. Leo stood beside her. His grip on her was too casual, too practiced. His thumb grazed her knuckle as if to say, "I'm here, I'm with you, say nothing stupid." She didn't meet my eyes at first. When she finally did, it was like watching someone look into a photo of a person they used to love. Her lips parted. "Jose?" she breathed. My name sounded like a prayer said out of habit, not belief. I waited for the rush, the joy, the tears, the familiar warmth of the girl who used to sing to me during midnight drives. But all I felt was a slow, suffocating stillness. Because then, I saw it. The ring. It wasn't mine. It gleamed on her finger with a clarity I couldn't ignore. Gold, polished, too pristine. It sat there like a declaration, shimmering under the sterile lights. Leo's ring. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His silence was loud enough. I didn't look at her hand again. I didn't want to measure how many promises she had traded mine for. She stepped closer, her hand slipping from his, like guilt had finally started to weigh something. "I didn't know how to... I thought you..." Her voice cracked, but there were no tears. I studied her face. Her makeup was soft, her blush barely touched her cheeks, her mascara didn't smudge, because she hadn't cried, not for me. Maybe she had once. Maybe she wept when they turned off the machines for the first time, or maybe when she realized I might never wake up. But that girl was gone, and the one who stood before me now was a stranger dressed in my memories. I didn't ask her why. I didn't need the story. It was already written in the way she avoided my mother's gaze. In the way Leo stood too still, like he feared one wrong move would shatter the illusion they'd built together. I didn't feel anger. I felt something worse. A slow, heavy grief. Not for the years I lost, not even for her, but for the version of me that kept loving her through silence. The boy who believed she'd wait. The boy who held onto her name like a lighthouse in a storm. He died before I woke up. The nurse entered quietly, breaking the standoff with a soft smile. "We'll need to run some tests soon," she said, glancing between us. "You should rest, Mr. Vasquez." Almeida stepped back. Leo took her hand again, but she didn't pull away this time. "Goodbye," she whispered. She didn't say I'm sorry, she didn't say I waited, she didn't say I loved you. She just left. And the room went silent again. Only this time, it wasn't empty. This time, I was wide awake. And I would stay that way. Because this wasn't a coma I was trapped in now. This was clarity. And I wasn't going to sleep through betrayal again. She came alone the next time. No Leo. No ring. At least not one I could see. Just Almeida, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed like they were the only thing keeping her from falling apart. The room felt colder when she stepped in, not because the temperature changed, but because the warmth that used to follow her had vanished completely. I didn't speak, I didn't offer a smile, I just watched her. It's strange how your body remembers someone even when your heart forgets how to trust them. The way she stood, the curve of her neck, the softness in her posture, I remembered all of it. Muscle memory, emotional memory, and yet, everything felt foreign. She walked over slowly, stopping just short of my bed. Her eyes flickered to the IV in my arm, then to the band around my wrist. She wasn't wearing any makeup this time, no perfume either, just the scent of rain clinging to her coat like she'd walked through the storm without an umbrella. I looked at her. She looked at the floor. Then she whispered, "I didn't think you'd wake up." Her voice trembled, not with guilt, but uncertainty, like she wasn't sure if she had the right to say it aloud. I turned my head slightly, my voice still raw from disuse. But I did. She nodded, lips parting like she had 1,000 words ready. But what came out was silence, followed by the worst sentence I could have imagined. Leo was there for me. My jaw clenched. She didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't say I failed you. She gave me context instead, like betrayal needed footnotes, like sleeping beside my best friend was justified because of circumstance. We didn't plan it, she added quickly, hands wringing. It just happened. Grief turned to comfort, and comfort turned into love, I finished for her. She froze. Even that word sounded foreign in her mouth now, as if she didn't earn the right to speak it, but said it anyway out of obligation. She stepped closer. I never meant to stop loving you. I laughed, but it came out hollow, broken. You just meant to love someone else while I wasn't looking? Her eyes welled up, but no tears fell. It was complicated, she whispered. That word. That cursed cowardly word people use when they don't want to say what really happened. 2 years is a long time, she added. I was tired of waiting for a ghost. I stared at her, trying to find even a shadow of the girl I loved, the one who used to trace stars on my arm, who kissed me between chapters of her favorite book, who said, even if you fall asleep for 100 years, I'll be here when you wake up. But that girl didn't walk into this room today. This woman in front of me? She wore that girl's face, but not her heart. You thought I was dead, I said slowly. So you buried me early. Her hands dropped to her sides. I visited, she said. Then stopped. She didn't deny it, she just nodded. It hurt too much. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her if she thought it didn't hurt me, lying there in silence, hearing Leo's voice morph from friendship into something else, hearing her footsteps fade, feeling her absence like an amputation. I waited, I said, voice cracking. I did too, she replied, almost defensive. No, I whispered, you moved on, that's not the same. She didn't respond. There was nothing left to defend. Her silence was louder now than it had ever been before. I turned away, staring out the window. The rain had picked up, gentle drops becoming streaks against the glass. My reflection stared back at me, pale and hollow. 2 years gone. And for what? I'd survived for her. Fought for her name like a talisman in the dark. And she'd handed it to someone else. I brought you something, she said finally, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a letter. Handwritten, folded carefully, a faint crease down the middle. I didn't reach for it. She placed it on the table beside me. I wrote it on the day they said you might not wake up. I glanced at it, then back at her. And what would I find in it? I asked. Love? Guilt? Goodbye? I don't remember, she admitted. I never opened it again. That made 2 of us. She looked at me for a long time after that, like she was trying to memorize my face, as if she knew she might not be allowed to see it again. And she wouldn't be. I know you hate me, she said finally. No, I replied, still watching the rain. I don't hate you. She looked surprised. I turned to meet her eyes, just once more. I pity you. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. You had a love worth waiting for, I said, voice steady now. And you chose a shortcut through grief. Her shoulders collapsed slightly, as if the truth weighed more than guilt ever could. And then she nodded. Not in agreement, but in understanding. She walked to the door without another word. I didn't stop her. She didn't look back. Only the faint creak of the door reminded me she was ever there. After she left, I stared at the letter. It sat untouched beside a cup of cold water and a tray of pills. I didn't open it. Because I already knew how the story ended. She had written goodbye in ink long ago. But today, she carved it into silence. And silence speaks louder than any apology ever could. The sky was grey the day I left the hospital, not stormy, just indifferent, like it couldn't be bothered to celebrate or grieve. The air carried that dull scent of concrete after weeks of rain, and my body, still sore, still weak, moved like it was catching up to the 2 years my mind had already lived. My mother wheeled me to the front, brushing my shoulder every few seconds like she needed to confirm I was real. I watched the glass doors slide open, and for a brief moment, I imagined stepping into a world where everything had waited for me, frozen in time, untouched by betrayal. But time doesn't freeze, people don't wait. And standing just outside the doors was the proof. Leo. He held a bouquet, sunflowers and blue hydrangeas, my favorite, a ribbon wrapped twice around the stems, knotted tight. He grinned when he saw me, too wide, too practiced, then he did what any best friend would do. He hugged me, tight, too tight. "Jose," he choked out, "you made it back, man, I knew you would." I didn't hug him back, but he didn't notice, or pretended not to. His body trembled, either from emotion or the weight of lies too heavy to carry in silence. I couldn't tell. I didn't want to. My mother smiled gratefully at him, then excused herself to speak to the nurse about my discharge papers. And there we were, just the two of us, two childhood friends, two liars. He held the flowers out to me with a sheepish shrug. "Didn't know what to bring, she always said you liked these." There it was again, she, not Almeida, not your girl, just she. As if she were a ghost, floating between us, unclaimed and unspoken for. I took the bouquet but didn't look at it. I looked at him. And there it was. The smile, not wide anymore, not loud, just subtle. Tucked into the corner of his mouth like a secret he didn't mind being caught with. It was the same smile he used back in high school, when he beat me at C.S. not because he played better, but because he moved a piece while I looked away. Smug, careful, victorious. And I realized then, he hadn't taken her by accident. He had waited for the moment I couldn't fight back. He had whispered prayers over my still body, not to bring me back, but to keep me silent. And I had one question. A single thread I needed to pull, even if it unraveled everything. "Did you love her before or after the crash?" He blinked. The question hung in the air between us like fog that wouldn't lift. His lips parted, then closed, and he said nothing. Not a word. But that silence. It answered everything. I didn't need the details. I didn't need the dates. Because love, real love, doesn't begin in the arms of your comatose friend's girlfriend. Not unless the seeds were already planted long before the accident. Maybe it started with a joke she laughed at too long. Maybe it started with him noticing when I didn't. Maybe it started the day I told him I planned to propose and he smiled, but didn't mean it. But whatever it was, I saw it now. He hadn't stepped into her life to console. He stepped in to claim. He offered me space. He offered me healing. But not once did he offer me truth. And yet, there was no confrontation. No fists, no shouting. Only distance. And silence. Two men who used to share secrets now sharing a wound. He cleared his throat and looked away, pretending to admire a passing car. "If you need anything, man, I'm here, I mean that." I nodded once. Not because I believed him, but because I'd already decided what I needed. Distance. Not from him. From the version of me that believed loyalty, guaranteed loyalty. From the boy who brought Leo into every chapter of his life, assuming he'd never try to rewrite the story. I rolled the bouquet in my hands. A blue petal fell, drifting to the pavement like a quiet truth. "She said it was complicated," I muttered. Leo stiffened. "I bet it was," I added, meeting his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak. But I was already turning away. That night, back in my apartment, a space I barely recognized, I placed the bouquet in the sink and left it there. The petals wilted faster than I expected. On my nightstand sat a box I'd never gotten to open. The promise ring. Still in its velvet case, untouched, unworn. I opened it slowly, watching the silver catch the light. I had it engraved months before the crash, just 3 words on the inside, "I still choose you." But choices mean nothing when the other person's already made theirs. Later, I found a photo in a drawer. The 3 of us. Laughing. Almeida in the middle, leaning into me. Leo behind, one arm thrown around us like he was part of the joke. But his eyes, they weren't on the camera. They were on her. I didn't notice it then, but I saw it now, and I knew what that smile meant all along. It wasn't guilt, it was victory. It was the last box I opened. Tucked beneath old hoodies and college notebooks, it had survived 2 years untouched. Dust clung to the flaps, sealing memories I wasn't sure I had the strength to face, but the room was quiet, No machines, no beeping monitors, no whispered apologies, just me and the drawer. I sat down slowly, the weight of recovery still in my bones, and pulled it open. And there it was. A small velvet box, midnight blue, no bigger than a matchbook. My fingers hovered over it like it might burn. Like opening it would unleash something I couldn't put back. But I opened it anyway. Inside, the ring looked exactly as I remembered. Polished, untarnished. A simple silver band, elegant, quiet, engraved on the inner side, in a cursive only I could recognize, Almeida. I stared at it for a long time. The silence around me was deafening, but the memories were louder. She was the one who insisted it wasn't an engagement ring. "Let's take it slow," she'd said, twirling the box between her fingers. "But I still want something that says you're mine." So I gave her the only thing I had left after selling my motorcycle, skipping 2 months of meals, and working double shifts. A promise. She called it our beginning. She said she kept it in a drawer beside her bed. That it helped her sleep when I wasn't there. But I held the same ring in my hands now, and that meant one thing. She lied. She hadn't kept it. She hadn't even looked at it again. She buried it, just like she buried me, quietly, efficiently, like you do with things that no longer serve you. For a long time, I sat there, ring in hand, box at my side, feeling every part of what she left behind. Not just the abandonment, but the erasure. She'd rewritten our story while I was still trapped in a silent chapter, unable to defend myself. And somehow, that betrayal burned deeper than Leo's stolen affection or her said apologies. Because this ring, it was supposed to be the anchor. Now, it was just a relic. A symbol of something only I remembered. I stood up and placed it on the edge of my dresser, didn't put it back in the box, didn't shove it away in some drawer to forget. No, I wanted it to stay there, to remind me. Not of her, of me, of the boy who gave everything for love, and the man who was still standing. The next few weeks were a quiet war, physical therapy, speech drills, scar treatment. I pushed harder than anyone asked me to, not because I wanted revenge in the traditional sense, but because I wanted to reclaim my narrative. If they were building a life together based on the assumption I'd never come back, then I wanted to build one that made them question everything they chose instead. I started sketching again, portraits, moments, flashbacks I couldn't speak aloud. My hands were clumsy at first, but the muscle memory returned with each line. Every night, I filled page after page with fragments of the past, not to mourn, but to study, to understand, to transform. One drawing in particular stopped me. It was her. Sleeping in the passenger seat, hair cascading over her shoulder, sunlight dancing across her face. I'd drawn it once before, the night I first bought the ring. Back then, it symbolized a future. Now, it was just a frame, and I tore the page in half. A few days later, I opened a blank canvas and painted something new. A man standing alone on a bridge at dusk, the wind pulling at his coat, a silver ring falling from his hand into the water below. It was the most honest thing I'd ever created, and when I posted it anonymously online, I didn't expect it to resonate. But it did. The comments flooded in. Felt this in my bones. I've lived this painting. This man is me. I never mentioned her name, I never told the full story. I didn't need to. Pain has a way of speaking without names. Soon, a blog picked it up. Then a gallery reached out. They wanted more pain, more truth, more of him, the man who let go of a ring instead of revenge. And so I gave them what they asked for. Paintings, sketches, words wrapped in silence. Each piece a thread I pulled until the past unraveled and the future began stitching itself back together. I still kept the ring. I never sold it, never melted it down. I didn't need to. Because unlike her, I never threw my promise away. I kept it. Not for her. But for the part of me that still believed love could be real, even if hers wasn't. And one night, as I stood at the window of my new apartment, watching the city breathe below me, I placed the ring on the windowsill, not hidden, not forgotten, just there, a monument to who I was, and a warning to never go back. Pain was my first language after waking. It lived in my joints, my muscles, my throat. It sat behind my eyes like a ghost of the time I'd lost. Every breath was borrowed, every movement a rebellion. But I didn't scream, I didn't curse, I simply endured, because if there was one thing they underestimated, it was the boy they thought they'd buried. They forgot I had always known how to start over. Physical therapy was a slow cruelty. Each step was a negotiation with a body that had forgotten how to obey. My right leg trembled like a leaf in wind, and my left foot dragged like it was mourning something. The therapist smiled too much, and the air always smelled like antiseptic and metal, but I got up. I walked until the pain bent me. Then I stood again. Speech therapy came next. I had to relearn how to shape vowels, how to make my voice strong again after months of disuse. I used to be quiet by nature, but now I was silent by survival. Every word I forced out was a protest, every sentence was a resurrection. And at night, when my body begged for rest, the nightmares came. Not of the crash, but of them. Almeida laughing in someone else's arms. Leo holding my promise ring like a prize. My mother crying beside an empty bed. I'd wake drenched in sweat, fists clenched, throat raw. But I never cried. Tears were a language for people who still hoped. I was fluent in something colder. When my hand stopped shaking, I began to write again. Not as Jose. As Orion Vale, a name I scribbled on a napkin one morning, halfway between exhaustion and epiphany. I didn't want recognition, I didn't want revenge. I wanted release. I wrote essays about grief, about liminal space, about what it means to be alive and invisible at the same time. I wrote about silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that fills rooms after a goodbye that never came. People read, people cried, people listened. My inbox flooded, strangers said they felt seen, survivors said they finally had words for their own ache, editors wanted more, the anonymity gave me room to breathe. No one knew it was me, and that made it honest. Then came the paintings. It started with charcoal sketches, shaky lines, unfinished faces, then oil, acrylic, watercolors. I let the brush say what my throat couldn't. My first real piece was a boy underwater, arms outstretched, eyes open, surrounded by hands reaching for the surface without ever touching him. I titled it, He Heard Everything. Then came, the bed she stopped visiting, then, the best friend who never knocked, and finally, the woman who forgot. That one sold in 2 hours. A gallery emailed, a curator called, they wanted to know the story behind it. I gave them nothing. Because what's the point of telling a story people were never listening to in the first place? But the world listens when pain is painted pretty. A blog picked up one of my essays. Then a podcast read a portion aloud. Then a news anchor quoted me without knowing who I was. And suddenly, Orion Vale was everywhere. The voice of the voiceless, the artist behind Heartbreak's new aesthetic. They didn't know the hands behind the canvas were the same ones that once couldn't hold a pen. They didn't know the man they buried was walking among them, watching, breathing, creating. Until one night, an email changed everything, a reporter from the Herald. Subject, interview request. The woman who forgot. Has a voice after all? The message was short, direct, hopeful. She said she'd traced a few IPs, that some essays matched linguistic rhythms to old college articles under my real name, that one painting used a signature only barely erased. She asked one question, do you want to tell your story? I stared at the screen for a long time. Did I? What was the story? A boy falls in love, she makes promises, he crashes, sleeps for 2 years, wakes up to betrayal, rebuilds. Sounds simple when flattened into words. But it wasn't a tragedy anymore, it was a transformation, so I said yes. We met at a quiet coffee shop, she brought a recorder, I brought the ring, I placed it on the table between us. She didn't touch it, just looked, and then, we talked, for hours, about time, about silence, about how betrayal doesn't always scream, sometimes, it just walks away quietly, and by the end, she looked at me with eyes full of something I hadn't seen in years. Recognition, not pity, not sympathy, just clarity. The article dropped 1 week later, front page, title, 2 Years of Silence, a love story that wasn't. It was poetic, it was mine, and they read it, all of them. I know because I got 3 messages that same night. One anonymous. Is this you? One unsigned, I didn't know you felt all that. And one that just said, I never forgot you. But I didn't reply to any of them, because I wasn't him anymore. I wasn't the boy they left in a hospital bed. I was the man who painted his way out of the grave they built for him, and this time, they were the ones left watching. It came on a Thursday, a white envelope, heavy in the hand, the kind that whispers prestige and deliberate intent before you even tear it open. The paper was thick, the corners gilded, the calligraphy too elegant to be accidental. It smelled faintly of roses and regret. My name was written in gold. Jose Emmanuel Vasquez. I already knew what was inside, but I opened it anyway. The card was ivory, embossed, crisp. Together with their families, Almeda Grace and Leo Sebastian invite you to celebrate their union in love and trust. The words bled softly into my chest. Every letter was a needle, threading through old wounds they assumed had long scarred over. The date was set. The venue, a garden hall I once suggested for our anniversary. She laughed at the time and said it was too much like a fairy tale, but I guess he made it real enough. I sat there in the quiet, the invitation spread across my lap like a confession neither of them had the courage to say aloud. They didn't expect me to come. That's what made it so easy to say yes. The day of the wedding arrived like a curtain call. I dressed in black. Not a suit, but a tailored coat that draped long against my frame, soft charcoal trousers, and a button-down so crisp it sliced the air when I moved. My cane, black walnut, silver-plated handle, clicked rhythmically on the marble steps of the venue. Each step felt like punctuation, like I was writing the ending they never saw coming. People stared as I entered, some in curiosity, others in discomfort, and a few in recognition because a coma might fade a face but not a name like mine. The garden was staged like a dream, ivory chairs, floating petals, a string quartet playing something gentle and painfully hopeful. I walked through the aisle, not to the altar, but toward a table near the front where gifts were placed in neat, curated rows. That's where I left mine. Wrapped in brar, own craft paper, simple, intentional. Inside, a painting. Framed in gold, titled in silver script, The Ring She Forgot. It was soft watercolor. A girl's open palm, facing upward, rain trickling between her fingers, and resting at the center, my silver promise ring, the one with her name still engraved inside, unworn, untouched, but glinting in full color. I placed it gently, right in the middle of their curated love. The ceremony began shortly after. I stood at the back, under the awning, shadows swallowing half my face. And then, she appeared. Almeda. She walked down the aisle in white lace and beige heels, no veil, just soft curls, flawless skin, and that same cautious smile she wore the day she told me she didn't think I'd wake up. She was mid-sentence when she saw me. Her mouth faltered. Her steps slowed. And for a breath of a second, she looked 17 again, standing in my doorway, holding a book and asking if I believed in forever. Leo turned to follow her gaze. And when he saw me, he choked on his champagne. The glass slipped slightly in his grip, staining his cuff. It was poetic. They didn't expect ghosts to show up to their wedding. But I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was the memory they buried alive, now dressed in black, breathing, watching, unafraid. After the vows, there was a reception, laughter, dancing, toasts. I didn't speak to them. Not yet. But I felt them glancing at me every few minutes, like I was the punchline to a joke they couldn't quite explain. Until finally, they approached. Leo first. Jose, he said, adjusting his tie like it had become too tight. We didn't think that I'd show up, I finished. He swallowed hard. Yeah. I tilted my head. I figured. Almeda hovered beside him, hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles were pale. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I nodded toward the table. Did you open the gift? Leo glanced at her, then back at me. He shook his head. You should, I said. He hesitated, then turned and walked away, relieved to have an excuse to escape. Almeda stayed, eyes on mine. You look well. she said finally. I am. She nodded. A sad little smile curved her lips. You've changed. I rebuilt. The silence between us stretched like old fabric, once warm, now fragile. Her voice dropped. Why did you come? I looked at her. Really looked at her. And I saw it, not regret, not love, but the faint shimmer of doubt. And that was enough. 2. Return the favor, I said. You showed me what forgetting looks like. I wanted to show you what remembering feels like. Her eyes dropped, she swallowed. I did love you, you know. I know. She stepped back. Do you hate me? No, I said. You buried a boy, but you didn't kill the man he became. Leo returned moments later, the frame in his hands. He looked stunned, maybe ashamed, but mostly confused. This is the ring? He asked. The one she said she kept. Almeida's face tightened. He looked between us, realizing this wasn't a gift, it was a mirror. He opened his mouth to speak, but I was already walking away. My cane tapped the marble floor one last time as I exited the hall. The wind was soft outside, gentle, the sky painted with lavender and steel. Behind me, laughter rose, but none of it was mine, because closure isn't loud. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, leaves a painting on the gift table, and exits without applause. Sometimes, it just wants to be seen. The balcony was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comforts, but the kind that makes your own heartbeat feel too loud. Below, the wedding party shimmered under golden lights, crystal chandeliers swinging softly as guests danced, laughed, toasted. Their music felt miles away, like a dream I had woken from too early. The night breeze brushed against my coat, cool and scented with lavender and roses, the kind of florals Almeida always used to love. Funny, how I remembered details she probably forgot. I leaned on my cane and looked out over the railing, watching champagne bubbles catch in lantern glow, rise, and disappear. And then I heard her. Soft steps, slower than usual. She didn't call my name. Just stood there behind me, as if her presence alone could speak the apology she never managed to say aloud. I didn't turn. Not at first. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of her guilt before she even opened her mouth. I thought you'd already left, she said, her voice low. Fragile. I did, I replied. Just not far enough. There was a pause, then a trembling exhale. I shouldn't have invited you, she murmured. It was selfish. I looked at the stars. But you didn't, you just didn't expect me to come. She walked to stand beside me, close, but not close enough to reach. There was mascara clinging to her lower lashes, her lips trembled even in stillness. I saw the painting, she whispered. The ring. Her voice cracked. You kept it. I nodded once, slowly. Because I meant it. Another silence. Then the words I'd been waiting to hear, not for closure, but confirmation. You deserved better, she said. And just like that, the air thickened. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how late they arrived. How empty they sounded when they finally made their way to me. I turned to her, fully this time. Her eyes were glossy, not from joy, not from beauty, but from very thing she buried and hoped wouldn't resurface. She looked like the girl I once loved, but not the woman I'd stood across from earlier that evening. No dress, no spotlight, no Leo, just Almeida, stripped down to silence and shame. I studied her for a long moment. The wind tugged at her veil, loosened her hair. There was something poetic about how the night tried to unmake her. No, I said finally, voice low. She blinked, startled. No? I didn't deserve better, I whispered. I just deserved the truth. The breath she took then was sharp. Like I'd cut through her with something cleaner than anger. She looked down at her hands. Then reached for mine. Fingers trembling. A moment of intimacy that used to be automatic now felt foreign, forced. But I didn't let her touch me. I stepped back. She froze mid-motion, hand still hanging in the space between us. And for the first time, she was the one left in silence. No defenses, no explanations, no edits, just stillness. I waited for her to speak, to say I'm sorry in a way that didn't sound rehearsed, to tell me Leo wasn't worth what she lost. To confess that some part of her still missed me. but nothing came. And maybe that was the truth I'd been looking for all along. Not what she said, but what she couldn't. Her eyes shimmered in the soft glow of the overhead string lights. Her lips parted slightly, as if holding back 1,000 words, but none brave enough to be spoken. She wasn't the villain. She wasn't the girl I used to love either. She was something in between. A story I had outgrown. I nodded, more to myself than her, and turned away from the railing. "I wish you peace," I said softly. "Not love, not forgiveness, just peace." She didn't follow me when I walked back inside, didn't reach again, didn't cry out. She just stood there, silhouetted against the stars, with a hand that never touched mine, and a truth that came far too late. The next day, I received a message from an unknown number. No name, no signature, just one line. "You were right. I forgot how to remember you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because sometimes, the last thing you say to someone isn't a grand declaration or a cinematic goodbye. Sometimes, it's a whisper at midnight. A step backward when they reach forward, and the silence that follows. That's your freedom. The first morning in the new city felt like standing on the edge of a page that hadn't yet been written. There was no familiar scent of Almeida's shampoo lingering in the hallway, no creaking floorboard outside the bathroom that used to betray her quiet steps, no forgotten sweater on the back of my chair, no Leo, just light, pouring in through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the echo of my own breath as I stood inside the empty studio I now called home. A canvas leaned against the far wall, blank, waiting, not demanding, not expecting, just waiting, like I had, for far too long. I named the studio Still. One word, simple, unassuming, like the moments that stay with you long after the people are gone. It sat above a flower shop, on a quiet street tucked behind a park that bloomed too early in spring and burned too brightly in autumn. I liked that. Things blooming and burning at the same time. I painted by the window most days. Sometimes abstract pain. Sometimes portraits of faces I no longer spoke to. And sometimes, just shadows, long, reaching shapes with no source, stretching over water or walls. People came. They stood quietly in front of my work. Some cried. Some smiled in ways I didn't understand. A few returned more than once, as if the pieces spoke a language they were still learning to hear. I started signing my name again. Jose Emmanuel Vasquez. No pseudonyms, no masks. Not anymore. Because I was no longer hiding. Articles called me the coma survivor who redefined silence. They said I was brave, powerful, a symbol of healing. But I wasn't any of those things. I wasn't a phoenix rising from ashes. I wasn't a monument to resilience. I was just awake. Truly, fully awake, for the first time in years. And waking up didn't mean joy. It meant clarity. It meant finally seeing that the people I held onto like lifelines had already let go. Sometimes, I'd walk past a bookstore that displayed my essays in the window. They titled it Letters from the Half-Silent. I never reread the pages. I remembered every word too well, but occasionally, I'd catch someone flipping through it, brows furrowed, fingers pausing on the lines that had cost me sleep. Lines like, "Some ghosts are still breathing." It wasn't the betrayal that broke me, it was their ease in moving on. Love isn't a promise, it's a memory someone else might choose to forget. I never blocked Leo, never deleted Almeida's contact, but they never reached out. Not once. And that told me everything I needed to know. Because the deepest kind of betrayal isn't that they left. It's that they never turned around to check if you were following. That they never even noticed your absence. It wasn't me who vanished. It was them. They were the ghosts. Flickering in and out of truths they were too weak to carry. Drifting through new beginnings as if love had an expiration date written in invisible ink. One afternoon, while closing the studio, I found a small envelope slipped beneath the door. No name, no return address. Inside, a single card, just one line. I still think of the boy who whispered forever. I didn't need to guess who it was from, but I didn't respond, because I wasn't the boy anymore, and forever should never be whispered, it should be lived. At night, the city hummed, not like the beeping monitors or sterile halls I once woke up in. This hum was alive, people laughing in restaurants, strangers dancing in alleyways with earbuds in, street musicians playing violin solos to no one and everyone, and in that chaos, I found peace. Not the peace you sit still in, the kind you walk through, step by step, unapologetically. I passed a mural once, one I didn't paint. A massive figure stood on the wall, black coat billowing, holding a golden ring between his fingers. Behind him, a trail of ghosts disappeared into fog. And underneath, in bright red, the ones who forget you were never awake to begin with. I didn't know who painted it. But I stood there for a long time. Long enough for a woman to come up beside me and whisper, "It reminded me of something you once wrote." I looked at her. She was holding my book. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not the kind you give to be polite, but the kind that leaks truth through cracked armor. I never looked back. Not to the town where we met, not to the room where I slept, through my own erasure. Not to the people who wrote me out before the story was done. Because I finally understood, closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from movement. From choosing not to chase the ones who disappeared into their own selfish light. I didn't rise to be seen. I stood to be free. And as I walked through the city one final time that year, coat flaring in wind, hands stained with charcoal and oil, I looked up at the sky, painted in soft purples and burnt orange. No ghosts, no shadows, just the man who lived, and never needed to explain why.